Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Data Resilience SpectrumCast. Over the course of the last few weeks, we've really been talking a lot about what you want to do to prepare for malicious threats. And IBM and the Ponemon Institute have done surveys for the last few years that talk specifically to the different types of threats that are out there and how we want to address them. So their main data breach kind of report breaks it down into three key categories. The three key categories are human error, system failures, and then malicious attacks. Now, human error and system error make up about 50% of the issues. And quite frankly, we're all human. Humans build machines. There are going to be mistakes. It's just going to happen. It's the malicious threats that make up the other 50% that we really want to pay attention to. So recently, we've put together 6 key things that folks should understand in order to build a highly data resilient environment. And this spans beyond what other competitors are talking about, from just scanning your backup, all the way from starting out with administrative security, moving on to the identify piece, the encryption components, the multiple backup components and the reasons behind those, and the ability to kind of automate and orchestrate. We've laid out the 6 key things. Let's dive into each one of these on these next few Spectrum casts. So the first one that we really want to dive into has to do with this data resilience wheel of security. And basically what we're trying to say here based on this, and I'd like everybody's kind of thoughts around what they see in the industry, is that for any device or any application, we take the security of that application, the ability to log in, things like multi-factor authentication, all the way through to something we call code signing. In the event of I install an application, I want to make sure that's the same application I installed before it actually touches my data. So team, what do we necessarily think when we think about the security level or the administrative security level when it comes to the applications and the devices in our environment?
I'd like to just begin by saying that not branding it the Pokemon Institute is a real missed opportunity. But that said, I think it's really exciting, and we've talked a lot about this, and we'll be talking more about it. To see the depth and breadth of this message and this vision, I think is really interesting and really important. We're taking a view of this problem domain, which is huge and getting bigger every day, and also getting faster and more aggressive every day, and really taking a comprehensive, very rigorous view of end to end, from the edge to the data center and everything in between. And I don't think you really see a lot of other vendors doing that, like taking that broad and comprehensive of a view. So I think that's exciting. I think it's the right way to approach it. It's really the only way to approach it if we want to have any efficacy. And it's good to see. And I think our clients are echoing that as well.
Tristan, Sean, do you guys you deal a lot with, let's say, just the application side, the Protect side, the Protect Plus side. Do you think people are actually thinking a lot about, geez, is that application secure enough to actually touch my data? Is that a reasonable question to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think these days that's all they're thinking about, right? I mean, there are too many headlines and too much of this stuff going on. And it's just it's not a question of if, it's a question of when you're going to be attacked, from the smallest enterprise to the largest bank.
And I was going to say, it's not just if that application is secure enough to touch that data, but what about that administrator who is running that application? Are they secure enough? And do they have the training, the credentials to be touching your data and being responsible for it?
Well, it's kind of funny, and I guess my thinking has evolved on this. If you would have asked me 6 months ago or a year ago how you should set up the administrative security on Protect and Protect Plus, I would have told you go with an enterprise security provider, go with LDAP or go to Active Directory. But I think these days I'm really rethinking my recommendation there, because those service providers are just such a broad vector of attack, so to speak, right? That a lot of times we are seeing when things get compromised, what gets compromised and destroyed? Well, Active Directory and LDAP. So I'm almost thinking I would rethink that whole recommendation and just advise that the data protection system be a standalone security.
Yeah, it's like the risk of that standardization and that broad level of standardization is it does create a huge, very well understood attack surface everywhere. So that's a really interesting point.
Right. I mean, you used to get, and you do get with those systems, the broad array of enforced password changes, all of the various security rules and recommendations that come with having that large standardized system. But as you said, you also get now the broad plane of attack for anybody to come in there and mess with it. And if it gets compromised, not only do they own the production data, but they also own the data protection system.
But isn't this category, Steve, really looking at that administrator, how you can use like good hygiene, good industrial practices just to keep it from an administrative point safe? Not necessarily. I agree that the vectors and getting into the Active Directory and all might be an issue, but backing it up and just looking at this segment, a lot of it's good hygiene. A lot of it's making sure the passwords are being changed, making sure you're using the role-based access, make sure you're deleting the people, the administrators when they leave the company, making sure you're not using just one administrator, that everybody has their own so you can track them.
That's an excellent point, Trish. And I think you echo when we had Dan Thompson on talking about good hygiene. And I think that is a great term because I don't think a lot of people back up and kind of take a look at what is their environment kind of made up of today versus, geez, when I set this up 10 years ago, yeah, Bob was here, but he's no longer here. I think we see a lot more applications, not just data protection applications, but a lot more applications doing things like multi-factor authentication now. The other cool component that we added to Protect and coming soon to Protect Plus is the dual authorization, right? So if you have let's say someone gets called into the office and gets fired, and on the way out the door, they hit the button to delete a container pool. You actually need two people to kind of turn that key like the nuclear bomb versus giving one person the ability to do that, which is putting in those types of safeguards that are helping to protect folks these days.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not even, something drastic like someone leaving the company and being vengeful, but, someone makes a mistake, someone hits that delete key and when they thought they were just deleting one little file space and it ends up to be the whole VM, all the VMs. So I think having that double check on these destructive commands is really critical.
Yeah, administrative security to me feels like kind of the table stakes in a way. It's like designing for security. So how you architect your applications, how you instrument your infrastructure, how you do alerting and monitoring and user administration and roles and responsibilities, like a lot of the very basic building blocks for any, information system feels like it falls into this category. So it's really the preliminary stuff you do before you get to the point where you're ready to turn it loose.
Right, and having, for instance, the logging so that if someone does issue a delete, I can trace back and see, oh, that was Joe who did it. And then wait, Joe's not in the company anymore. So being able to really figure out and sleuth if there is a problem, what did go wrong, so you can make it more secure in the end.
Yeah, so this feels like the part that's might not be the sexiest part of the whole cyber resilience story, but it's absolutely crucial to developing and releasing in an environment that has any hope of being secure and being resilient. So,
it's more than not sexy, it's ugly, right? I mean, security is a pain. That's the reality of it, right? Everything you make me do from a security perspective is likely a hassle and takes labor to do and do correctly. And that's why people tend to not do it. I mean, I can't tell you how many, quote, small systems I've seen where there's a single administrator doing everything, right? And in many cases, data protection used to be considered a, quote, small system, right? I only have a few number of administrators here, so I'm just not going to worry about giving everybody unique IDs. Well, these days, that's a bad idea, right? I mean, it always was a bad idea, But these days, it's even worse of an idea than it used to be.
Well, and the very public outcomes and results, of these attacks that are happening on a daily basis
But do we
seems to
even
be.
hear about the public outcome
yeah.
of user errors and administrator
Oh, sure,
errors?
sure.
I mean, if they're hiding these big attacks, how many of these stupid
Oh,
errors are they
Absolutely.
hiding?
I mean, if there's one, I don't know if I'd call it a silver lining, but if there's one, positive thing to come out of it, is it does really seem to be lighting a fire under organizations of all sizes and in all industries and across the world to take this seriously. Even to Sean's point, it's a pain in the butt, it's ugly, it's expensive, I don't like doing it, but I don't have any choice. I either have to do this or tomorrow I will face an existential threat to my business. So I suppose that's the one good thing to come out of it, maybe.
Yeah, and back to what I was saying in the very beginning, and Randy, I think you pointed out, and I appreciate it, right? We have competitors like Dell EMC with their Cyber Vault talking only about things like scanning your backup to ensure that data is clean. Well, the first thing you can do to prevent bad things from happening all the way down the line is to start with good administrative security in using that application or protecting it. So we outlined today the administrative security components. Of the 6, we talk administrative security, the ability to identify and monitor, that'll be next week. Encryption, great way to protect your information just as a standard practice. The multi-layered backup strategy, we'll talk about what that means. Air gapping and isolation, how that plays a part of what you're trying to accomplish when it comes to securing your data. And then the notion around automation and orchestration. So again, this was all about administrative security. Now, Randy, let's take a spin on the wheel of misfortune. We all run around with devices in our pocket. It's part of how everyone lives today. And now all of a sudden, big impact. Want to tell us about it?
Yeah, so everyone's favorite, well, not everyone's favorite, but many people's favorite, including mine, by the way, personal device or portable device, has come under some scrutiny recently. So there's a company, it's an Israeli company called NSO Group, and they have developed a sort of white hat spyware application called Pegasus that's being used by government agencies and communication providers and telcos to sniff out security vulnerabilities and problems. And they've uncovered some security vulnerabilities within iOS in particular. Now, Apple still basically lays claim to being the most secure mobile operating system out of the box, and the out of the box user experience is the most secure among the major platforms, although the gap is narrowing. But it's interesting in the sense that a company like Apple that has taken great pains to ensure that their devices are secure and that they're able to be deployed in the enterprise and in high security governmental agencies and the like, has resulted in their success in the market. I mean, they're hugely successful selling these devices into all markets, all geographies, all industries, commercial, consumer, everything in between. But they're also a very closed ecosystem. So the whole Apple, walled garden philosophy very much applies to security as well. So the point that the folks from NSO are making here is that it would be in Apple's best interest to be more collaborative and to be more open in terms of how they talk about security and how they talk about mitigation strategies and potential vulnerabilities, and sharing more of that information with other providers in the space. So I think it sets up an interesting dynamic where Apple is increasingly under pressure from outside influences and outside forces to modify and enhance their security and their ability to communicate security within the industry. It's also internal to Apple got to be something I would assume that is an important discussion point for them, because a big part of their success in the market, again, has been their adherence to and their commitment to security. So, they've got a decision to make whether they want to continue to have a very closed, very opaque ecosystem, or whether they're willing to be more collaborative with some of these, standards organizations and some of these organizations like NSO and others. So it just sets up an interesting thing to watch, I think, as we move forward into latter parts of this year. And frankly, there's going to be government regulations and compliance requirements that are going to drive a lot of these discussions and decisions as well. So, I presume we're all basically using, mobile devices if we're on the IBM, VPN and using IBM resources. So, this matters to us as well. But anyway, it sets up kind of an interesting dialogue going forward, I think. So watch this space, I would say.
Yeah, and I had to laugh. I was driving up between San Jose and San Francisco up the 101, which is the main thoroughfare through Silicon Valley, and every mile you saw the iPhone commercial about Apple trying to reassure everybody that they are secure. So
yeah, so not surprisingly, I mean, Apple's exceptionally good at understanding the market and responding and reacting to trends in the market very quickly and at scale. So the question is, will that drive changes in behavior or changes in their design ethos, or is it just going to be lots of billboards and ads and sporting events? And we'll see.
I got a news flash for you. They're not, right?
Yeah.
Innovation is at odds with security, right? And we have pushed the wheel. I'll never forget, not to get off into a crazy story, but 30 years ago, I was working on a bank checking, a DDA system where we were dealing with money. Every line of code was reviewed by 3 people before it went into that system to check for security breaches and the like. And now, of course, that system was very slow, right? Because we didn't make many changes and it took a long time to innovate, but it was secure. And we have gone to the opposite side of the spectrum now. We value innovation more than we value security, and quite honestly, proper functioning, as evidenced by my camera today, which I just did an Apple update. It doesn't work anymore. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how those two things are gonna.
Sean, you're such a cynic.
I'm in a bad mood. My camera's broken today.
It's okay. I understand.
Do you ever see that, Sean, switching, or do you think it's going to be like that for a long time, or do you think these attacks are going to finally force us to do something?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer.
I mean, I think at some point there's going to be no choice. I mean, again, I think companies like Apple and others and IBM and any company is no longer going to be able to have that kind of laissez-faire attitude about security. You can't, because the threats are just too numerous and too sophisticated, and they're evolving so rapidly that you don't have any choice. Like, you either keep up or you perish. So I mean,
the consumers, as witnessed by these billboards, the consumers are obviously getting concerned, and so now that's making the industry pay even more attention.
Well, and the market will dictate, right? So if Apple comes out tomorrow and says, we have announced a new, security ASIC that's going into every one of our devices, and it has been tested and proven by 50 different independent agencies, and it's quantum resistant and yada, 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 then they'll sell more devices. So at the end of the day, it will be as with everything else. The market will determine how fast it goes.
Yeah, I think it gets back to what Steve always preaches about, which is data identification and system identification, right? I mean, if my cell phone doesn't work well, yes, I'd be mad, but I'm still okay. Whereas if the system that checks the people into the hospital doesn't work, that's pretty bad news, right? And we've had a lot of examples lately here in the United States where the system that checks the people into the hospital has stopped working or been encrypted and people couldn't get to it. So.
Brady, I want to thank you for taking us down the road of, we talk a lot on these wheel of misfortune cyber threats around companies being attacked. It's now hitting, the personal device, and it's making everything personal now. And so, everybody's going to be vigilant about security and these types of things. So, team, I want to thank you very much for a very thoughtful conversation today. And with that, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Stay resilient.